Okay, tonight's homework presentation is on condensation and precipitation. I want you to take a minute and look at what's happening in this graphic in front of you. When the precipitation, which is stuff that falls from clouds, is starting, it is snow, pretty little snowflakes. When it gets to a certain height in the atmosphere, you can see those snowflakes start to change to raindrops instead. Those are the blue raindrops in the middle. And then sometimes, not always, if it's colder right down by the Earth's surface, those raindrops might get super cooled and they may start to freeze again. And then we would have what's called sleet. There's not going to be a quiz after this presentation, but I would like you to take out a piece of paper. Feel free to write any notes you'd like during the presentation, but you are going to draw a picture at the end. Okay, so make sure to have a pencil and a blank piece of paper. So condensation. Condensation occurs when water vapor changes into a liquid. If you remember from the phase changes we learned about in chemistry, there was solid, liquid, and gas. Condensation is when a gas turns back into a liquid. For condensation to take place, the air must be saturated, and saturated air is air that holds as much moisture as it possibly can. So think about the summer, and it's when it's really, really, really humid. That's when you might see condensation or experience condensation. Think about when you take a shower and the mirror in the bathroom is all foggy. That's condensation that's happening there. That air is really saturated from all of the moisture that was put into the air from the shower running. For condensation to occur also, you have to have a surface on which the vapor can condense. So if there's no surface at all in the air or around like the mirror, then you're not going to get condensation. And condensation forms a cloud up in the atmosphere. Precipitation is when water droplets or ice crystals that make up clouds become large enough that they fall to the ground without evaporating. A lot of times precipitation happens way up in the upper layers of the atmosphere, like even cirrus clouds, but they're so high up that by the time that precipitation gets down to where we are in the lower troposphere, they've evaporated away, and so we don't actually see that precipitation. In order for precipitation to be happening here where we live on the surface of the Earth, those crystals or raindrops have to be large enough that they haven't evaporated and they actually hit the ground. Here is an animation of a cloud forming by condensation. As it rises up, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and then it gets large enough that those raindrops, they are a little unnaturally big for the size of the cloud, end up falling down to the ground. That's what those blue circles are. So there are 5 main types of precipitation, most of which you should be familiar with. The first one is rain, which is liquid precipitation. Hopefully you guys are all good with what that is. Snow is precipitation. That's in the solid form, not the liquid form. And the solid is ice crystals. Sleet is actually particles of ice. They were raindrops, like in that first picture that you saw on the first slide. They were raindrops, but the air is colder closer to the surface of the Earth, and so those raindrops freeze as they fall. And they're defined as being less than 5 millimeters in size. Freezing rain is rain that freezes when it hits the ground. So it's rain, and if it hits you or it hits your car, it's still rain, but it doesn't freeze until it hits the ground because the surface of the ground is colder than the air that's around it. And finally, hail. Hail is the one that confuses a lot of people. Hail is pellets or clumps of ice that are greater than 5 millimeters in size. So if they're less than 5 millimeters, they're technically sleet. If they're greater than 5 millimeters, they're technically hail. And hail forms in clouds when these the snow or the rain or the sleet bounces up and down in a cloud, and as it bounces up and down, it collides with other water particles that freeze together until they all clump together to make a big hail pellet. So here is a nice diagram that explains what's going on. All the precipitation is starting as snow, okay? And depending on how wide that band of warm air is, if it extends all the way down to the surface of the earth or if it doesn't, that determines what kind of precipitation actually lands on us. So if that layer of warm air is really wide, then that snow is going to turn into rain and the rain's going to fall. If it's not quite as wide and then it's colder again at the bottom, the snow is going to melt into rain and then it's going to freeze into freezing rain when it hits the ground. If that layer of cold is a little bit wider, it's going to melt into rain and then it's going to refreeze into sleet. And finally, if the layer of cold is really wide, it's going to stay frozen the whole time as snow. So this is the picture that I'd like you to draw for your notes tonight and bring into class tomorrow. Don't worry if you're not that artistic. You can make it a little bit more graphic if you like, but I want this picture in your notes so you have this as a good representation of these 4 different types of precipitation.